Hey guys, so I just watched the new Fear Street movie last night, and I don't think disappointment even begins to explain what I'm feeling. Now, to start this video, let me just say, I was a big fan of the trilogy set of movies that Netflix had put out. You know, I'm not super familiar with the books. I read a few of them when I was a kid. I was definitely more of a Goosebumps fan. Dabbled with Bone Chillers, things like that. But I've really liked the Netflix movies, so much so that I have this box set here of the 3 movies on VHS. So it's it's definitely like, you could tell it's like horror made for teens, but I still think it was really fun. It's a movie that I visit every year. My wife and I, we do 31 days of horror movies in the month of October. And last year we started even earlier in September to get in a little extra, Halloween themed movies. And she's not super into horror movies per se, so the Fear Street movies is a nice middle ground for the two of us to come together. So when we heard they were making another Fear Street movie, super excited, couldn't wait to see what they did with it. Happy to have another movie in our Halloween rotation. Unfortunately, that's not going to be the case. This is a one-time watch. But before I dive into all the negative aspects of the movie, there were some things that I did like about it, so let's start with that. So starting with the slasher villain of the movie, the character design for them I thought was pretty interesting. It wasn't too cheesy or anything like that. Overall, I thought, it did a good job at unsettling you. It's, a figure that I wouldn't want to run into, in the middle of the night with no one around. The story did set up several red herrings. I wasn't really sure which direction it was going to go in as far as who the killer was. They were dropping all these little hints of all these, seemingly insignificant characters and, them making, offhand comments that seemed peculiar. So I really wasn't sure who it was going to be, and ultimately completely disappointed with the direction they went. But, we'll get to that point later on. I'll get into the acting of the movie a little bit later, but there were some good performances. The love interest, I thought he did a decent job, and the popular girl's mom, I thought her performance was good as well. Being that this is a movie in the Fear Street series, I was a little concerned about how they would tie this movie into the Sarah Fear mythology. I didn't want it to be just a rehashing of what was already established. I wanted it to be, something unique. And it's definitely that. It's really its own thing. And, maybe that's not such a good thing. So let's talk about some of the negative things about the movie. So even though I was saying that I liked that it was a departure from the Sarah Fear mythology, other than Fear Street being in the name of the movie, it felt like a completely different movie. Other than the references to them being in Shadyside, some vague mentions of, the Nighthawk camp, and I think at the end, they say, it's worse than, X event that happened in the prior timeline.
It's worse than 78.
There's really nothing that makes it feel like they're in Shadyside. And with it being in Shadyside, the whole time I was questioning, is this happening because of Officer Good? What is the connection between Shadyside and the events of the movie? Ultimately, completely unrelated. And to dive further into the setting of the movie, it didn't really feel like it was in the 80s to me. They have 80s music playing in the background, but I think you could have put it at any point in time and it not really impact the story. So while I said there were 2 standout performances, the majority of the acting in the movie was really bad.
And Prom Queen, the perfect girl to represent the perfect new shady side.
We were only 1 or 2 minutes into the movie, and right away I said, oh, this is going to be a bad movie. And, I didn't want to say anything to ruin the experience for my wife. I didn't want to put it out there and have her thinking like, oh, this is bad. But you get a minute, 2 minutes in, and you're kind of wondering, oh, is this going to be a parody? Like, are they doing a goof on, some classic high school tropes, or, what direction are they going with this? Ultimately, no, it's just, bad acting, bad performances, bad writing. The main girl that you're supposed to connect with, I don't even remember their names. She has such an emotionless performance in the movie. I don't know if she's supposed to be, reserved, the quiet girl, kind of numb to the world. Maybe that's the approach they were going with. But, it feels like there's nothing there. She could have been the killer for all I know, because their performance was just so lifeless. There's nothing to pull you into really caring for her character, other than you feel bad for the circumstances that surround her and her family.
Cool. Hey, dickwad. Don't think about playing any of that weird shit, okay? You play what I say.
The jocks in the movie were, like, over the top, like, every trope you could think of, they played into that, totally hammed it up. And the wolf pack, as the girl equivalent jocks are called, there was no personality, nothing there. There was one girl who finally stands up for the girl that's being bullied, and you finally get a distinct personality from this character, and it's too late because she's killed less than 5 minutes later. It's like as soon as something interesting starts happening in the movie, they drop it. They don't execute on what they set up. And to circle back to the performances of the jocks and, the overtop character traits they had, the tone of the movie was all over the place. The majority of the movie feels like it's set up to be this serious horror flick. As serious as this, teen horror movie can be. And, there's times where it's just so jarring that you wonder, oh, are they leaning into the fact that it's bad? Is this supposed to be a parody? But then they don't continue that. There's like these weird spurts.
Wowzers.
When the principal is maimed and his arm is cut off, he's carried out on a stretcher, and they're carrying his arm on a food platter with him. That's like perfect for a dark comedy, but this movie didn't really have any elements throughout the story, other than these random events. There were some interesting kill scenes in the movie, but then again, some of it was so over the top that you don't know if it's supposed to be funny or, what direction do they want you to go and how are you supposed to feel? And, even further about the kills, they establish that the best friend of the movie, she's into practical effects and doing these pranks that involve mutilation, right? Where, hands cut off and it's a fake rubber hand, fake decapitated head in the punch bowl. I mean, I I don't know when the kills are happening. Is this like real or is this just fake? Because the effects weren't totally convincing. So I was like always kind of like suspending my belief and then saying, oh no, I think I'm supposed to feel that this person actually is in danger and that they actually got hurt. As I said before, I really wasn't sure which direction they were gonna go as far as who the villain would be. I had thought it must be the father. He didn't really die and he's out for revenge and he's gonna kill all the other high school prom queens that are competing against his daughter so he can finally have some peace or, revenge for what had happened to him. They were dropping a couple hints where it could be these, characters that are kind of lurking in the background, making these offhand comments. And they go the most disappointing route I think he could have went. So, spoilers, the villain or villains in the movie is the main bully's parents. I should really know their names, but the movie is so forgettable, I'm not going to invest the time. So the main antagonist of the movie, the girl who is bullying the main character, her parents are so wrapped up in prom and wanting her to be, this picture perfect child and, socialite within her peers, that they kill off all the other teenage girls to ensure that her daughter is the prom queen, that there's no one else for them to choose from. And I couldn't be more disappointed by that decision. For the majority of the movie, you really only see one killer, and then towards the later half of the movie, it's revealed that there are actually two killers, the Scream trope. And, once that happens, it really narrows the pool as far as who it could be. Once it was revealed that the father was the killer, I said, okay, well, obviously the mom's the killer, and the daughter is in on it too. And, the father is caught. So you say, okay, well, we're going to have another 20 minutes of this where things settle down and you think it's over. But no, then the other killer is revealed, which will be the mom. And of course, the daughter is going to be in on it. They reveal that, oh, it was actually us who killed your father. And, at that point, yeah, we know that. You don't need to explain it to us. Of course, that's what happened. It really was the worst choice they could have went with. I was already disappointed with the movie, but, my enthusiasm for it went even lower. While Fear Street isn't quite Stranger Things level of fandom, I think it did garner a decent following, and to follow up that trilogy with a movie like this, it's unbelievable to me that Netflix would put so little care into this movie. When my wife and I went into watching this movie, we were pretty excited. You try to make events out of, the seemingly mundane things in your life. And, we were even talking about how in high school, or, even middle school, the thing to do after a dance or something like that was to go to the local Friendlies or go to Applebee's. And, we had said, oh, should we get like takeout from Friendlies or Applebee's to like really play into this whole prom, season, everything that the movie was gonna be. I really wish I could say more positive things about the movie, but the fact is that it just doesn't have much to say about it. I was looking online, it has a 2.5 rating out of 5. I will give it a 2.5 out of 10. That's how little I think of the movie. Ultimately, people are going to watch this movie, and if you like it, that's fine. I'm happy you enjoyed it. For me personally, it's just not for me. And I'll be fair, I'll say I don't think I'm the demographic for it. It always seems like, these teen horror movies that come out, even though, they're supposed to be for an older crowd, it feels like, it's probably a great movie for like a 12 or 13-year-old that's into horror. These light horror movies. For me, it just didn't connect. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you're, interested in it, go for it. So that's all I have to say about it. I just wanted to share my thoughts with you guys. And yeah, hopefully Netflix decides to do something better with this Fear Street series, because I think it could be, their next Stranger Things if they really put love and care into developing it. So that's all I got. I'll see you guys next time.